Today, I would like to talk about how to measure whether the technical and business requirements of service have been met. To manage a service well and satisfy stakeholder expectation, it is important to understand which behaviors are important and how to measure and evaluate these behaviors. The type of system being evaluated determines the data that can be measured. For example, for user-facing systems, response sent against the user request refers to availability. How long did it take to respond, which refers to latency. How many requests can be handled, it defines throughput. For data storage systems, how long does it take to read and write data, that is latency. Is the data there when we need it, that is the availability. If there is a failure, do we lose any data, that's the durability. All of these questions can be answered with the data gathered from the services. A common way to measure success is to use KPIs. KPI means Key Performance Indicators. KPIs can be categorized as business KPIs and technical KPIs. Business KPIs are a formal way of measuring what the business values, such as return of investment in relation to project or service, earnings before interest, customer churn, or maybe employer turnover are some of other business KPIs. Page views, user registration, and number of checkouts can be considered as technical KPIs. They can measure how effective the software is. These KPIs should also be closely aligned with business objectives. How the business measures success of the systems that you design is important from architectural point of view. We should not assume that KPI is same thing as a goal or objective. The goal is the outcome or result you want to achieve. The KPI is a metric that indicates whether you are on track to achieve the goal. Each KPI should have an accompanying goal. After defining the goal as starting point, for each goal, we define the KPIs that will allow us to monitor and measure progress. Target for each KPI defines the success. KPIs are monitored against the accompanying goal to achieve success and apply adjustments based on feedback. As an example, a goal may be to increase turnover for online store, and associated KPI may be the percentage of conversations on the website. For KPIs to be effective, they must be specific rather than general. For example, user-friendly design is not specific. It is very subjective. Measurability is important because monitoring the KPIs indicates whether you are moving toward or away from your goal. Being achievable is also important. Expecting 100% conversions on website is not achievable. KPIs also must be relevant. Without a relevant KPI, the goal probably will not be met. Time-bound helps with measuring the KPI. Some KPIs are more sensitive to time. For example, availability per day, per month, or per year. Let's define how to provide promised level of service to customer. It is important to define service level indicators, service level objectives, and service level agreements. Those measurements describe basic properties of metrics to measure. Service level indicator is a quantitative measure of some aspect of level of service being provided. Examples include throughput, latency, and error rate. Service level objective is an agreed upon target or range of values for a service level that is measured by service level indicator. An example of service level objective is that an average latency of HTTP requests for service should be less than 100 milliseconds. Service level agreement is an agreement between a service provider and a customer. SLA defines responsibilities for delivering a service and consequences when these responsibilities are not met. The service level agreement is a more restrictive version of service level objectives. Solution designed should maintain and agreed service level objectives so that spare capacity against the service level agreement is secured. Understanding what users want from a service will help the selection of indicators. The indicators must be measurable. For example, fast response time is not measurable, whereas HTTP GET requests that respond within 500 milliseconds aggregated per minute is clearly measurable. Similarly, highly available is not measurable, but percentage of successful requests, overall requests aggregated per minute is measurable. Apart from having measurable indicators, how they should be aggregated also requires careful consideration. As a sample case, let's look in details how to calculate requests per second to a service. For example, consider requests per second to a service. How is the value calculated? By measurements obtained per second or by calculating average number of requests per minute. Per second measurement may hide high request rates that occur in bursts of few seconds. For example, consider a service that receives 1000 requests for first 30 seconds and 0 requests on next 30 seconds. The average request per second could be reported over a minute as 500. However, actual load is twice as large as the average. Averages can mask worse user experience when used for metrics like latency. It can mask the request that took a lot longer to respond than the average. It is better to use percentiles for such metrics, where high order percentile such as 99% shows worst case values, while the 50% values indicate a typical case. Selecting service level objectives has both product and business implications. Often trade-offs need to be made based on constraints such as human resources, time to market, and funding. The aim is to keep users happy, not to have an service level objective that requires heroic effort to maintain. It is better to have lower service level objectives to begin with and tighten them over the time as you learn about the system, instead of defining those that are unattainable and require significant effort and costly try and achieve. More complex service level objectives can obscure important changes in performance. Thanks for listening and see you all our next podcast.